Before seeking Jesus, I simply walked the earth, never truly understanding that I walked on the very thing I came from, which is dirt. And I used to think I was some sort of king, never realizing that I'm only the created being. I did what I wanted since it was my life, and I never even knew my purpose of being alive. Before knowing Jesus, my love and affection was in the form of a whipping of a belt, with yelling and cursing coming out. With moments of anger, nothing was withheld, and if you can name it, I was most likely hit by it. Hangers, belts, and clenched fists, phone, cups, shoes, and heels. And after years of this, I concluded that love couldn't possibly be real. And all I desired was to feel something, because after being numb for so long, the only desire you have is to feel. And I didn't care if it was fake or real, and I wasted my time self-satisfying on a computer, thinking that my acceptance came from the ability to be like mankind. And I allowed these addictions to burn images forever into my mind, because this was the only way I could be a man. And I hated who I was because of what I did, and which didn't really make sense because I had no idea who I was. I hated everything about myself. The masks that I wore were only an outer shell. I perceived myself as a glorified trash can because inside I felt like hell, even though I thought it was only an imaginary place. Before finding Jesus, people were like a mathematical equation. I could add or subtract you as simply the process of elimination based on your participation in my edification. Because if you didn't do anything for me, well, then it was time for your excommunication, because in my mind, I was the center of gravitation. And I lived in constant comparison. I was prideful in my intelligence, and it's kind of funny how I thought I was never good enough, yet I thought I was always better than everyone. I used to live in necessity, and God was a concept I didn't need. It was a concept that didn't even make sense. How could an invisible God give strength? How could God pick up dirt and give it formation? If God was real, I needed an explanation. Dirt doesn't come alive with breath. How can a sea be split in two? How can man be made new? And how can fire burn soaked wood? How can a fire 7 times hotter than normal be withstood? How can the dead be raised as if they were only asleep? And more importantly, how could a man die for me when I wasn't even close to existence? And I determined all this information that I read in the Bible was utterly useless. To me, it was a great fairy tale with great morals, but it wasn't for me. Sure, it sounded great, but even if the possibility that it was true, well, with the life that I lived, it wasn't worth it. And finally, I came to the point where I decided that God wasn't real, or that God wasn't dead because he was never alive. I determined in my mind that I needed to learn the ins and outs of the Bible to prove that it was alive, because the only enjoyment I had left inside was the satisfaction of bringing others down with me. After all, the Bible was only a book that most Christians haven't even read. It was leather-bound with white pages and blank ink that turned red whenever it was something that Jesus said. And so I studied and kept looking for contradiction, and this obsession I had to prove it wrong consumed my life like an addiction. And I asked questions where the answers were unknown, and the answers were always, well, that's just how things go. And I finally felt good that things had no explanation. I could finally have a logical reason to support my separation from all religion and its so-called transformation. And the last thing I questioned before I completely walked away was what I believed to be the greatest contradiction. It was the biggest historical moment known as the crucifixion. So I studied and kept reading, and I determined to prove that this whole historical moment was full of lies. And I researched, and everything changed when I had a revelation of Jesus Christ. And I was searching for an explanation of the truth when God revealed his Son as proof. And his grace and mercy invaded my mind like a million darts, and his love forever wounded my heart. God revealed to me the beauty of the cross, not as just a symbol, but as a loving proposal. This proposal never matched in history of love stories. This proposal started with him down on both knees, chained to a post, so that one day we could be betrothed. And his flesh was ripped off, and every drop of blood was completely undeserved. But he went through it all so that he could not only say, I love you more, but I've loved you first. Then forcefully they put a crown of thorns on his head, mocking him continually like a broken cassette. And he was covered in blood, spit, and tears. And he was in complete exhaustion and anguish, but he persevered. And then on his back he carried a tree. And the Bible says that he who dies on a tree is cursed according to Deuteronomy. But he willingly took my curse, all because he loved me first. And he finished his proposal with his arms nailed wide open so that his love can be spoken. And his love is unfailing, which means it'll never be broken. He opened his heart to all of mankind so that they could accept him and be divine. And this love took my breath away. My words could never fully portray the fullness of God's glory. There's not a single word in my vocabulary that could accurately and adequately describe his love and beauty. And I began to see that I was unworthy to receive his grace and love. And I realized that my lungs can't fully function until I breathe in his mercy. I was the creation. I was a fragile and weak being. Without him, I cannot do anything. And I looked at the cross and I said, I want to be yours for eternity. With tears like a waterfall, I said, yes, Lord, I accept your call. And I wept and I wept. And for the first time in my life, I believed love was real. Love was true, and it wiped away every tear. And I embraced the proposal. And I said, yes, Lord, I am your bride forever.